here's the next slide here. Let's start talking about different types of banks that you can work with. And I've worked with commercial banks and I've worked with SBA. So let's talk through commercial, because ultimately, like I said, there's not a right or wrong. There's pros and there's cons. And it was the best structure for me on my first deal to go through and do this commercial loan. And then it's currently the best deal structure now for me on my next deal to do SBA. So we'll kind of talk through why this and that, and you'll see, I think it'll be clear enough for you to understand, like, okay, I would do it this way in my current circumstance. So let's talk through commercial, because ultimately this is just like you can go to any of your local banks and they have, a residential style department and they have like a commercial department, right? And really that's for businesses, right? This is the commercial side. So commercial will usually lend 70 to 80% of loan to appraisal, right? Meaning it's not what you purchased the property for, it's what the independent third-party appraiser says, here's what the value is. They're gonna take that value, and you're not gonna know that value until you've paid to have that appraiser go out and do the report. You're gonna take that value and say, okay, hey, based on this amount, you can borrow 70, 75, 80%. It may be different, but that's the most common, 70, 80% of the funds of this appraisal amount, right? If it was $1 million, the appraisal, you can borrow 700 or 800,000, right? Now that means you have to come up with the down payment of the difference of, 30%, 20% plus closing cost. So in this kind of way to go about this, in this commercial loan, they're just lending against the real property. Real property means the land and the building. They're not lending on the business, on any of the furniture, on working capital, none of those things, right? Where that is off the table, most likely in this type of deal. So that means that see the slide here, it says like no soft costs. That's what I mean by soft costs. Hard is like real property. It's the building, it's the land. That's hard. Soft are like furniture and like tax money for future and utility money. Those are soft things, right? So you're gonna need to have more capital in hand. Now, for me, why I did this type of deal is because I did this on a refinance. So I built Platinum Resort for $1.1 million. And then about 2 years later, I refinanced it. Now, it was worth over $2 million 2 years later. One, because I built it cheaper than it cost than what it's worth. And two, because real estate just goes up. And obviously in the last few years, real estate has gotten crazy high. So there is a play here to build something and then come back and to get a great stabilized loan. And that's what this was for me. Now you can, depending on your financial situation, start out with this, but you may need more capital up front for that. So that was a great fit for me because I built my building. I actually at that point used all private funds for it and used all investor money, and then refinanced after owning the building for 2 years and did a deal like this where they lent me, I think we were even lower. Because we didn't take any money out of the deal. So I think we're about like 60% or so loan to appraisal on this. So no soft costs, right? They didn't lend me anything else for the business side of it. Roughly fees and things, right? You pay roughly about a 1% origination fee. So 1% of the money you borrow, right? That's roughly what it costs. If you borrow $1 million, it's about $10,000 plus fees. And fees, right? There's appraisal fee. So if you get a commercial appraisal, it might be like in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. And then you have all these like title fees, escrow fees, tax fees, all these different things, which a few grand for all these different kind of things, right? So maybe 1% and then plus maybe like 15 grand. That would roughly be what the fees are. It is definitely lower, much, much lower. And there's less fees than the next deal we're gonna talk about if you're talking about SBA. So, and a clear advantage is lower fees. Maybe an advantage or disadvantage is you're gonna borrow less money. It means obviously you have less debt, which is a good thing, but now you have to come up with more cash out of pocket. So some of those things. Personal guarantee is going to be on both structures. And usually anyone who has 20% ownership equity in the real property or more has to personally guarantee. There are exceptions. There's definitely times when people under 20% are required or requested by the bank to personally guarantee. But a good general rule is like, hey, 20% or more, and you're gonna have to personally guarantee. And really what that means is, right, like even if you're going to have the property that you purchased, right? It's going to be collateral against the loan, meaning if you screw up, they can take the property back. But if that property is not worth as much as the loan, then there's a sequence of events, right? Now they can come after you personally, because like we just said, you signed to personally guarantee it. They can come after what you have, right? They can come after your home or the money in your bank account or other different things, rental properties, right? You've signed for these things to allow them to do that because you need to make the bank whole. So that's what the personal guarantee is on there. And pretty much you're going to have that. You have to do that with any type of loan for this kind of deal. This is a good long-term loan. These are usually 30-year loans. They can be fixed. They can be variable. They're usually pretty competitive on pricing. Generally, commercial loans are more expensive as far as interest rates versus like a residential loan that you're going to purchase and live in. But they're pretty competitive as far as loan rates and things like that go. You may need a takedown loan or a bridge loan if you want to do something like this. Like let's just say, for example, you wanted to purchase this property and it is an existing facility, right? And whether it was running great or whether you wanted to rehab it, there may be things that you need to get done prior to this, like permits or surveys or things like that. You may be able to ask for a longer escrow, but you may not. And so you may want to be able to take down the loan quickly. That's kind of more common if you're going to be building new construction, where you have to, buy the land, do a bunch of like geological assessments and, soils tests, and then get civil engineering and things like that, where it might take like 6 months. If you're going to buy an existing building, it may be, much more realistic that you can do a 60 or a 90-day escrow and usually just use this loan to take that down. So time frame on this is definitely faster than SBA, right? It's probably sometimes 30 days. That may be on the quick side, but 60 days, 30, 60 days for a commercial loan to do this. It's really not that complicated. It's very similar to like if you're just going to buy a house, right? You're going to get it under contract, open escrow, they're going to run title, then they're going to do a commercial appraisal. That's going to come back. It's going to go to underwriting. And that's kind of the gist of it, right? Like it's not too complicated. So there are pros here, meaning that it's faster, it's easier to do. I think the biggest advantage here is when you've owned a building and you've built equity in it, then you can come back and get pretty competitive terms. This can be used to get probably the best interest rate because really it's the safest loan because they're not lending as much, right? You have less, the bank has less risk because they're only lending, 70%, just the real estate, nothing on the business side. So the cons are really you have to come up with more money. Ultimately, like maybe twice or 3 times as much capital as the second alternative, which we'll talk to on SBA. You'll need, a lot more money if you have all of these soft costs. If you're buying an existing building, existing facility, and it's already running, right? It's good. And you can literally take off day one with their full staff and residents and everything, then you don't really have much as far as soft costs. So you may not need it. It may be a great way to go. So again, it kind of goes back to what is the fit for me, which is the best way to go for me.
There's 2 questions that are kind of similar to what you're talking about, so I'm just going to throw it out there.
Go for it.
Someone said, so if we come up with 30% down, then we don't need to provide personal guarantee.
Incorrect. Okay. No. Yeah. You will always need a personal guarantee. And when I say always, I mean 99% of the time. There's always some kind of exception, but yeah, you're pretty much anything we're going to talk about tonight. If you're going to borrow money like that, you will probably have to personally guarantee.
Okay. And then another individual asked, what are your thoughts about variable rate loans?
There's a time and a place. Right now, interest rates are high. I do not have a problem with a variable rate loan currently. A year or so ago, when they were like 3.5%, no, I didn't want one. I wanted to lock in that 3.5%. So when we talk about SBA, we'll talk about this. But the loan that I'm getting is a variable loan. It is prime plus a certain number. So Wall Street Journal prime, you can Google that. It fluctuates based on what the Fed is doing. So right now, I want to say it's at 8.5%. So it's usually prime plus a number, like say prime plus 1. So the interest rate in that example would be 9.5%, which is really high relative to what it was a year or two ago. That's just where the market's at right now, right? I am doing a variable loan, meaning it adjusts, right? Every quarter it can go up or down depending on what the prime is doing. If it's at 8.5 today and the Fed lowers it to 8.25 next quarter, and then by the middle of the year, they lower it to 8, and then by next year, it's at 6.5, every single time they've lowered it, my interest rate goes down, right? If it raised, it would go up. So, everyone who had one of these loans a year ago, I mean, it went up. It went up by probably a point or two. I think that I would not personally lock in a fixed rate right now in the 9s or in the 8s. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want that. I would insist on having a variable rate currently. But if it was 2 years ago, I would not. I would highly, highly not want one. And so there's pros and cons to this, right? Like, it's going to move. If we're in a hard spot right now where interest rates are high, then yeah, I personally think that it's going to be dropping this year and probably a lot more into next year. If I'm wrong, it is what it is, right? But at least I'm still making my 40 grand a month because it's not going to change it by that much.